All right, welcome to the September 24th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and we will get started in just a moment. All right, welcome to the September 20th. All right, audio sounds okay on my end, on my monitoring computer. All right, my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a product specialist focusing primarily on Steinberg products. And I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could post questions in... Sorry about that. Hang on. Just pause this or mute my monitoring computer. All right, so if you want to ask questions, you could just simply enter it in the chat field. Or if you want to submit questions in advance, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So I will not be able to keep up with the questions probably. So, in a live kind of back and forth manner, it will take me a while to get through questions. So if when asking a question, if you could specify which, for instance, which version of Cubase it is, where's Cubase Elements, Cubase Pro 11, which version, which level, that would be helpful, and also which operating system. If you don't get an immediate response, if we could try to avoid, basically just asking the same question repeatedly, that just slows down the entire process. That would be appreciated. I probably will get interrupted when my son gets home from school. But I think we'll have about 3.5 hours before that happens. So we'll try to get as many questions as we can. We'll try to have all of the topics discussed in today's live stream posted at the top of the comments field in the later tonight. So it takes a couple hours for me to do that. So that way you can navigate to particular comments. So a couple people just want to give a quick word of thanks to. So we have Agent K and Jazz Dude who do moderation for us. So if there's any riffraff, they're usually pretty good, and also for answering questions. So we appreciate them. So kudos to them. Also, if you wanted to look for previous topics that have been covered in any of our live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan, who I believe is on the live stream, I see him on already. So he's kind enough to put that together. And also yesterday, I believe, was Jan's birthday, so we'll wish him a belated happy birthday. So we appreciate everything that he does. And also another wonderful resource of information for Cubase, for the Cubase community, is the Cubase Nation Discord, in addition to all the official Steinberg tools and resources available. So Jazz Dude does a lot with that. So we'll just give a quick shout out to those people for their contributions to the community. So we will go ahead and get started. I'm going to pop out my chat field so I don't have to go back. And I see that we had a thumbs down, a dislike 30 minutes before the live stream started. So maybe someone was upset that I didn't start yet. So we'll try to get going. Okay, so we have a question from Uno Memento from Finland. I've downloaded Cubase Update 11.04. Should I update, for example, recommended Halion Sonic SE2? How do I know what version of it that I have? So if we have Halion Sonic SE, you could see if you click on the Steinberg logo up here, you could actually see which version of the Halion Sonic SE that you actually have right here. So you could see the version. So if you go to the Steinberg download assistant, if your version is older than the version that you currently have installed, then you could just simply download and install the update for that. I'm not sure if there's any with the 11.04. If there are any particular updates to Halion Sonic SE, but you could just check and make sure. All right, so we have World Domination checking in from South Korea. And also, if you're on the live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. One other quick note, we will be doing, since next Tuesdays will be the last live stream of the month, we'll be doing a shortened 2-hour live stream and a 2-hour Zoom meetup. And if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to send the Zoom invite for that. Okay, so we just see a question. Hi, Rob from Scotland. I got a pile of some fantastic groove templates from Cubase tools and promptly put them into the quantize panel. Trouble is there are so many that I can't access them all. Let's see if it continues. So yeah, with the groove quantize, if you make your own groove quantize template, it will just kind of all show up in here, and it doesn't kind of put it into folders. What I've seen some people do is just kind of to take a part, like different parts, and copy it, and then apply the groove quantize and save that as a MIDI loop. And then you could import the MIDI loop and apply the groove quantize, but it's, a small area of the program that, might be easier if it was manageable with folders, but it currently just kind of all goes into one collective folder. So you may have to just kind of prioritize different groove quantize templates for that. All right, so we see Matt checking in from Matt Elston checking in from London, and Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. All right, we have Thermonuclear War from Serbia, and Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. All right, and Stefan from Sweden. It's Soren as well. Okay, so you just see sometimes I render audio from 2 kick drum sample tracks and some hits don't line up exactly. Is there a quick way to make hit points of one audio track quantize 100% to hit points of another audio track? So let's say here in this file, I have 2 kick tracks, and let's say if they were kind of not lining up as expected, I'll just come over here. Let's adjust my threshold down for this. And let's say I will, let's just create warp markers. And let's say I'll just move some of these kicks like a little earlier or later in time. So if I wanted to take this particular kick here, I could go to the hit points and just come over here. So we'll just adjust our hit points again. And then I think if we create a groove quantize preset based on this, so let's say, okay, we look at this, let's create a groove that now when I go back here, and let's say if we're in our audio warp, that now I could just come over here, and I think this is roughly the area, and then hit Q, and then that will take the groove, the timing of this track, and apply it to this track here. So take the one that you want, go to the hit points, find the grooves of that. Go to the hit points editor. So double click, go to the sample editor, go to hit points, create a groove, and take the one that you want to change. And you may just have to find its hit points and go to, once we're in the hit points, create warp markers. And then at that point, apply the groove to that, and that should match them up if you want those to line up. All right, so we see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and we have, is it Juha or Juha from Finland? Thanks for joining us. Robbie Bowling from Dallas. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Luca. I'm going to format my computer soon. What's the easiest way to back up all preferences, custom hotkeys, VST custom list? Thanks a lot. So the easiest way to do this, if you go to the edit menu and go to your profile manager. And at this point, you could just export your profile, and on your after you have taken over, and once you're in the new system, just import that profile file, and then that should get all of the settings that you described. So kind of all the things that you use to make Cubase your own, which could be global workspaces, key commands, preferences, plug-in presets, all that stuff can be copied directly over within your profile. All right, so we have Theodore checking in from London. Thanks for joining us. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. Bear with me just for a second. Okay, so just see, hi Greg, sorry I missed your answer last time. What type of maximizer limiter got new Wavelab? So we'll just open up Wavelab here real quick. So I think the one we showed, and if you look in the index, you could find it as well. But let's say if I have... So I think if you just go to the maximizer here, this might be a track that we could show it on, may not be so heavily mastered. So, you know, if you want it more of like kind of a modern sound, you can do that. Now, if you want it to be more kind of transparent, you can go to the classic mode. But maybe for like more modern dance and EDM stuff. So it's bypassed, and now if we just put this on. If you want to even push it a little more. So that's a limiter that I would really kind of check out and play around with, and that's available also inside of Cubase as well. Okay, so I just see from John Costigan. Hi, Greg. I was downloading Groove Agent 5 and got the error message. Cannot download Groove Agent 5 after about 5 gigabytes of download. Any suggestions? So if you're doing it from the download assistant, let me just open it up. Maybe if we choose a different download location, John. So let's go ahead and just get this opened. Okay, so let's say if we're going to be in, I assume default Groove Agent, but let's, okay, so if you wanted to come, excuse me, right over here, you know, you could choose a different target folder. So if you wanted to just come right over here and maybe try saving it to a different location and see if that makes a difference for you. And you can do it would be kind of the same with the full version of Groove Agent or Groove Agent SE5. So see if you do that, if that makes a difference for you. All right, so we have ATMS checking in from Egypt. Thanks for joining the live stream. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, how can we preserve mono tracks while exporting? Could you please help? So let's say if I wanted to take this track here, and let's say if I wanted to export, I'll just do maybe a short range. So if I wanted to export these 3 mono tracks, when we go to our export audio mixdown, and there's some changes with version 11 for this, I'm going to take, let's say, my sub kick, and I'll just click on multiple. And at this point, we could see for effects what I want to do is just set this to disabled dry. I think this would do it. So let's say I want these to be imported into the projects. I'm going to create audio tracks. Okay, I'm going to add it to the queue. So we can see that those 3 tracks are now mono tracks. So and the trick here is just to, when you go to the export audio mixdown, if we have this going through inserts in the channel strip, that I believe will keep it mono, but once it's going through groups and sends that are involved in stereo, the track would have to be in stereo if you have stereo effects on it. So just under the effects, just set this to disabled, and I believe inserts and strip will also maintain the channel width, and then you should be all set with that. All right, so we see Sable Winters on the live stream, so wonderful to have you. And Marvel Jam and Randy Lee from Texas. All right, and we have Charles from Chicago. Okay, so we just see questions. On a side note, Cubase, Spotify wants minus 14 LUFS and minus 1 TP and less than 12 in dynamic range. I've heard supervision helps us see such things easy, but how important is the less than 12 dynamic range? Compressor fixes dynamic range. You could do that, but one thing that a lot of people miss is, let's say if I have a project that's set up for, like, I now have a mixdown file, and I wanted this to, you could also normalize by LUFS. So let's say if I take this particular file, so this could help a lot. So say we go to processes and we'll choose normalize. So I could just say, let's do loudness normalizing at minus 14. And now that will just automatically take that particular track and normalize it to minus 14 loudness units. So once you do your final mixdown, you could normalize it to, basically to what their 0 is at minus 14, what they're kind of expecting for their playback algorithms. Or you could even make it minus 15 and be one under, give yourself a little bit of wiggle room. But that's a good way. So, I'm not sure. You could adjust the dynamic range with the compressor, but it may not show you exactly minus 12, or less than 12 dBs for your dynamic range. All right. So we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to have the audio fader tab in the inspector always open? Okay, so let me just jump back to this. I'll activate the project. So I think that we could pin tabs here. So let's say if I go right click on the fader and I could go to setup. So let's say here I have it. We'll see this little pin item. So once that we have this pinned, now when I go, let's see if I have this open, I could always kind of keep the faders visible when opening other tabs. And as I go to different tracks, that will always be open. So if I now click on, okay, I want to go to sends, that now the fader will always stay open. So once again, just kind of right click on the inspector, go to setup, and right here, just you'll see like just this little pin item, and that will exclude it from automatically being closed, and that will remain open as you open up other inspector tabs. All right, wonderful to see Jeff Sabelski able to join us from Chico. All right, and we have Tony from Australia checking in, just going to listen today. So welcome. We know it's probably really late in the morning there. All right, and we have Daryl from Oakland. Thanks for your email. I'm glad that we got it sorted out for you with your recording in lanes, and great to see Mandy Lane on the live stream. So, and her question is, there will be Cubase 12, right? So yeah, I'm sure that, you know, the developers are always working on the next version of Cubase. So while everyone else is kind of in the middle of a release of, okay, this is the new Cubase that was just launched, you know, there's teams already working on the next versions and the version after that. And so it's a never ending cycle of development. So, you know, whatever version comes next, you know, the team is working on the next version. Okay, so we have a question. In the drum map editor, can I highlight multiple notes at one time and move them as a group? So let's go over here. Okay, and I'll just... All right, so if I just wanted to highlight multiple notes there, if I wanted to, say, select from all of the notes after a particular stage, I could just hold down Shift and double click and Shift. So say, and if I wanted to kind of draw a lasso or exclude notes, just hold down the Shift key, and then we could copy or move. So if I hold down Alt or Option, I could just copy those particular notes. And if you wanted to just hold down Shift, you could manually select your notes that you want to copy. And so if I wanted to move all of those notes right there, move these notes, again, just kind of standard selection, unselection, and alter option to copy and move the selected notes like that. So let me know if that makes sense for what you wanted to do. All right, so we have Richie checking in from Northern Germany. All right, you see comment from Andy Lane saying Cubase is the best DAW, hands down. So we're glad you like it. I'm a fan as well. All right, we have Taylor Sapp checking in from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Okay, so we have just a question. How do you export a multi-page score into one file? Seems like we can only do one page at a time, so let's go take a look. All right, so let's say now, if I just come here, let's say I go to page 2 in my file. Okay, so let's see if we could export this. I'll make sure I'm in page mode, which I am. I'm just going to save this to desktop. So it looks like it's just the first page. So it may be tied directly to the page mode, which is kind of, could be annoying. There may be, all right, I'll just check the export dialog here. So it looks like it may be one page at a time, which it could be annoying. I know that you could merge them in different OS versions. I will kind of take a look at it over the weekend, Taylor, if you want to email me to see if there's like a particular preference that I might be missing. But let me try just another method. Let me just say if I wanted to print this, and I'll just choose PDF. So if you just print and then use, so if you just print directly from the, and print it to a PDF file, that will include everything in this. So if you want to do multi-page, so that might get you there. But I'll see if the export score is tied to a particular page for if there's some reason behind it. All right, so we see from World Domination, thanks for your help. Stayed up till 2 a.m. Korea time and got the answer. You just saved me a ton of editing time. That's good. All right, so we have question. Hello from Nashville, Greg. I'm having issues in 11 Pro using a Zoom R24 as my interface, where every time I start up, I'm having to reset my input, output, and control room settings. No inputs. So I'm not sure if you're on Mac or PC, but a lot of times you may kind of, what I would do, if it's, maybe make sure that when you're starting Cubase that the Zoom is powered on before starting Cubase. So if it doesn't see it as a audio interface, if you haven't done that, that's one thing that you might be able to do. But if you go to the audio connections, once you have the inputs and outputs set up for the Zoom, and I realize this could be kind of annoying if it's, most of the time, like mine on Mac and PC will kind of, prompt me if it sees an interface change, but you could also save presets. So if you wanted to just simply come over here and you had like 24 ins or 16 inputs that are routed and you don't want to manually do it, save it as a preset. And then you have your inputs, outputs, and your control room all kind of recalled through presets very easily. So I would give that a try, but make sure that it's also powered on before you start your Cubase. Okay, so we have a question from Gary Ward. Hey, Greg, thanks for all the great information. I'm told that I can export an entire project simply by copying the project file and sending it via WeTransfer. Is that possible? So if it's only dealing with MIDI information, you could do that. But the problem is when we have audio in the recording, so let's say if I wanted to just look at let's say I'll just go to my Finder. So, when we start doing audio, that's when it could be a bit different because each audio recording is going to be a separate file. So when you come over here to projects, let's say if I wanted to take, this particular song here. So at this point, I could have all of the audio files stored in the audio folder. So if I just copy over like the .cpr file and send that, it'll just come up and say, and you don't include the audio files or the audio folder. The other person will just say, they'll get a message saying can't find these audio files. So if it contains audio, all you would need to do is just to come over here and, take this entire folder, and you could choose to, send this via WeTransfer. I just did it with a friend yesterday. So that's all, pretty easy to do in WeTransfer. So you could just say, take this whole folder. Some people will zip it and compress it and, depending on your operating system, like a Mac OS, you could just compress this so that all the folders with all of their internal folder structure will be copied over. And this, and another way to do this, if maybe you weren't as careful with all of your file management and maybe, files were recorded in different folders, or you have multiple audio files from different songs in the same folder, is just to come over here and do a backup project. And that will take all the files needed. You would define a new folder, and that would take all of the files needed for the particular project and be able to have everything in that new project folder that you could then share via WeTransfer. So if it's containing audio files and like edit history, that would need to be, more than just a project folder. If it's just MIDI information going to virtual instruments, at that point, you could send a one .cpr file and have that be translated over and be opened if the person is using the same instruments. Okay, so I just see from I think it's the question from New Jersey Buddha Man. So it says, sorry, and this is about losing the settings, the routing on the Zoom R24. It says, sorry, the issue is control room mainly between monitor and talkback, not getting playback. So if you have the control room set up and if you have talkback enabled, this could be kind of, muting the playback for your talkback. So if that is turned on, by default. Now there's one little preference that could help with this. So if you go to your preferences and go to control room, you could say auto disable talkback, like, in record or no auto disable. So like we often get a question when people are doing VST Connect recordings and they're communicating via talkback to the person. So while you're playing and recording, you could have the talkback disabled. So right now the talkback is turned on and I play. You can see that it will just automatically disable talkback while playing or recording, but the talkback could automatically be enabled when you're kind of parked or not doing anything so you could communicate. But, so that if you find that the talkback is kind of on when you don't want it to be, and then like you kind of hit play and it's like, well, I'm not hearing anything, try that preference. So once again, go to preferences and under VST to control room and auto disable talkback mode. I have this set to in play and record. So maybe that will kind of mitigate some of the issues for you. So see, I would like to know how many people use Cubase. Is like there a static on this or statistics? So I know that there's been over 3 million licenses of Cubase sold, roughly, but I'm not usually privy to all the numbers. I just kind of see, I only work for the U.S. distributor, but I've heard numbers like that. So there's lots and lots and lots of Cubase users in the world. All right. So we see a question from Tim Weinheimer. Where on the Steinberg website is the information on what are the latest Steinberg updates versions? So let's go ahead and take a look. See if we, generally a lot of times you could look directly in the hub. So let's say if I do a new project and we just go to connecting here. At this point, we could see news. I may be kind of blocked here real quick because of my live stream. But, and I think that maybe the news has kind of moved in the new website design. So let's take a look. Right. It's a good picture of Zed. All right, let me just. Let's see if it's maybe under. So, but a lot of times you could do it in, so I have a meeting on Wednesday, so I could bring up this, that people are kind of missing the news section, but you could also just go directly to the Steinberg download assistant and see kind of the latest versions. And if you follow any of the social media stuff, you know, they'll make announcements there. But if you come over here to the Steinberg Download Assistant, at this point, you could just see what the latest versions are here as well. So at that point, you could just see the latest versions there. But I'll see if I can figure out if there will be kind of the traditional news section back on the website. All right, so we see from John Costigan about the Groove Agent. It says the solid state drive Groove Agent 5 was going to was filling up. I meant to move the content in the library hard drive upon completion anyway. All right, so good. I'm glad you got it figured out. All right, so I see Jazz Dude had shared a link. Let me just type it in real quick for where Help Center. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mac OS is being annoying. All right, so it looks like maybe just under the support. That this is where you could see kind of, let me just see if I could. Yeah, so there you could see kind of different release versions as well. So thanks for that, Jazz Dude. All right, so we see Dan Freeman from Atlanta. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see a question from Andy Lane. Does the dongle need to be connected to USB at all times? So generally when running Cubase, there will be a lot of times when it will check. So you might get through a couple minutes and then it would, you know, look for the dongle or the USB E licenser. So generally you just kind of leave it connected. Okay, so we just see, hello, Greg. 5 songs, all 4-track from 3340 TIAC with Nuevo. 5 songs, mono tracks, all 20 need its own noise reduction using SpectralLayers with unique noise reduction. What's the best workflow to use and permanently save? All right, so let's say if I wanted to, so I think once you bounce the files that it could just automatically be applied to it. So, but I'll just do a new project here. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to do, we have kind of a noisy, hissy recording. So if I just wanted to now come over here, let's go to our extensions and just get rid of some of the noise on this. Okay, so let's say if I just wanted to find kind of, I'll just do a quick, dirty. All right, so let's say I want this to be my, I'm going to register that as noise. And now I wanted to do the noise reduction. So let's say I'll just, and let's say if I want to do maybe a second pass of it. So then I think if we just do even, you know, a bounce selection, that we could then, and maybe, I think if, I'm pretty sure if we just do a bounce selection here and replace the events, that we now have that file that's been rendered with a noise reduction. So, and you may find that you'll have kind of the same noise profile for all of the tracks if they're kind of recorded in the same environment with the same TAC 3340. Brings back memories using those machines. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. I think it's free ice cream for everyone. We'll see what flavors he has up his sleeves today. Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Devon Dennis. Hi, Greg. I noticed that when I make a chord track, when I take a chord from the chord track and try to resize the MIDI clip, the chords continue to play beyond the resize region. All right, so let me just try it out. I think we could start here with this project. Okay, so say, just have an electric piano here. I'll go ahead and just put in some chords. Okay, so when I take a chord from the chord track and drag to resize the MIDI clip, the chord continues to play. All right, so let's say if I come here and I will resize the MIDI clip here. So let's say I'll just switch this to beat. I'll resize all of these. Okay, and I'm just going to mute the chord track. Okay, so I think what it is when we do this, that the notes are still there. But I think that if we set a preference, let me just undo that last move. So we resize the event, but not the actual notes. So, and there's a preference that may affect this. So let's say if we go to, so let's say if we go to split MIDI events here. So now if I wanted to come right over here and say, okay, I want it to split. And now if we look even here, so when I erase the second half, that will erase the notes. So now when I make a cut in the event itself will cut the notes. But let's see if I do just a resize. So you may have to split the event. But otherwise, it's still an event that has notes that are hanging over. So try resizing it by splitting, and then you could erase that, and then you could see that that part will be blank, but this part still has notes that are long, and it'll continue to play even though it seems like there's nothing there, because that note event is still, the note off message hasn't been reached yet. So that preference again, if you wanted to choose to split instead of resizing, is just to make sure you go under editing, MIDI, and enable split MIDI events. All right, we see Michael Pierce joining us from London. Okay, so we see from Mandy Lane just saying, one thing I think Cubase does need to improve is automation clips, or so if you could let us know like what what you want to see for automation clips, maybe we could kind of show some tips and tricks with that, Mandy. I'll see maybe if there's further comment later on, but if there's anything that you're not understanding with the automation, but it seems to work well for lots of people. Okay, so I just see probably a further question going back to our drum editor. So let me just open this up about moving. Sorry if I misunderstood. So let's say if I wanted to come here, and I think he wanted to move multiple. So let me just read. It says, I mean, when in a drum editor creating names for drums, why can't I move the names as a group? So if you wanted to, so here it's going to be kind of one at a time. One thing that may help with this is, it's like if you have to move stuff around a lot, like here you may have a lot of empty drum sounds. Something that could kind of make it a bit easier, more manageable, if you click here on the visibility filters. So here we could only see events that are, that when we do this, that only have notes on them. So you won't see all the notes that don't have any data on it. So that might be more visible, but I see if you wanted to kind of move multiple ones of those, that it's going to kind of move one at a time for that. So I'll mention along. It may not be the highest priority, but we'll just so you kind of move one at a time there, but also try some of the different visibilities. And one of the things that you could also do is just reverse the drum sounds as well. So within the visibility map, so you could see only particular drum parts, or if you wanted to flip it upside down if it's not what you expected, but maybe that could make it a little bit easier. Okay, so we have a question, Greg. If I wanted to quickly insert some place and move the tracks, MIDI and audio, to have space in between in some quick way in my Cubase project, is there some option to be quick with that? So let's say if I wanted to add space on these tracks, and we could do it globally or on selected tracks. I'm going to use my range selection tool. Go to your edit menu and you go to range, and then you could just say insert silence. And then at that point, that will just kind of knock that particular space over. So if you have all the parts selected, it'll do it globally, or if you just wanted to do it on this one particular part, so that again, select the amount of time with the range tool, which is the second tool, or if you're using the combined tools, you could just kind of go to the top of the event, and at that point, go to range and insert silence. So whatever parts are selected with the range tool will kind of get bumped over. Okay, so we just see, is there any option how to work with my layer from multiple instruments to apply plugin effects from the third parties? Is the only way to use an effects channel track for the MIDI track? So that's, you know, probably the best way to do it. So let's say if I wanted to try this. And one trick that a lot of people miss is the ability to select, like, you know, your multiple events and just to assign an effects track right there. So let's say, get our samples loaded up here. So let's say, so if I wanted to take like multiple parts here, so let's say these are MIDI tracks, or it could be two instrument tracks as well. So if you just select those and go to add track, you could just come right over here, and you wanted to, so I'm going to select, so let's say, okay, we'll just take these two tracks, and let me just do it with, I'll just add a couple of instrument tracks. Okay, so what I could do is just take my instrument tracks here and right click, and I'll say, let's add effects channel to the selected tracks, and I could just come right over here and just add that reverb, so that as soon as I come here, we could just, you know, select multiple tracks, and then when we go to the sends for each of the instruments, that you'll see the reverb has just kind of been added directly there. So now we go back and forth and up and down. We can see that that reverbs have been added to multiple instrument tracks kind of simultaneously. Okay, reading through questions. All right, so we see the monk beats on. Thanks for joining us. Been a user since 1997. All right, so a question from the Monk Beats. If I insert bars offset, for example, 2 bars, can I set the time display to start from 0 seconds at bar 1? So let's say, okay, I'll just jump back to this project here. Okay, so right now, if we come to let's add some ruler tracks. So, and I want this to be bars and beats and this to be seconds. So we see that at measure 1, we want it to be 0. But if we wanted this to be, so let's say 2 bars, and we want, so can I set the time display to start from 0 seconds at bar 1? So I'm going to go to my project setup, where you just hit Shift S, and we're going to do a 1 measure offset. Okay, so right now when we look at this, we can see our time at measure 1 is going to be 2.4 seconds. So if I want that to start at 0 seconds but still have almost a 0 measure, so what I'm going to do is just come here, let's get to the project, and we're going to say set time code at cursor. So I'm going to say, just put zeros there, hit OK. It says, and I think I say no here. So as soon as I do that, we say no to that prompt, and right at measure 1 starts the time at 0. So when we come here, we can see our time is set to 0, and we're at measure 1, but we still have kind of our pre-roll bar right there. So we have our bar 0. So once again, once we have that done, choose to do a set from the project menu, set time code at cursor, enter it to be 0. It'll ask you if you want to keep it at the time code position. The existing events, choose no. And then we have measure 1, and then we jump right here. We can see measure 1 is starting at time code 0, and that at this point we still have kind of our pre-roll bar that's set to negative time right there. So let me know if that makes sense for you. Okay, going through more questions. Thanks for all the great questions. If you've learned anything new during the live stream, make sure that you just hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that as well. That allows us to be able to continue doing these live streams to help people out. Okay, we have a question from Alex Morgan. When editor background is set to white color scheme, when you open up the volume lane, it's impossible to see the volume line until you insert a node. Is it possible to make it more visible? Okay, so let's come over here, and I'll set my preferences for my editor area background. Okay, so let's say if we're here and we have kind of white editor background. All right. So let's say if I wanted to draw in, I'm not sure if this is with pitch bend or not. So let's say if I just draw in, let's say if I just want to come here and so as soon as I kind of, let's say if I'll just undo this and let's say I have no CC value. So we can see kind of what the CC value is here to start with and enter it. So let's say if I just kind of do that. So once we have that, so if you want it to be kind of white, I don't think that there's a way to change kind of the to change, you know, the relationship of this particular color. So you may have to judge just by initially, if you can't get a sense of it visually, where it's going to go just by the values. Like, you know, if you look on the right hand side, we can see our time value. I'll just turn off snap here. So you can see my position, and to the right of that, if I go just vertically up and down, we can see the actual value. So let me know if that kind of makes sense for what you want to do with that. But, you know, to get a sense of what the value, if you don't see it visually, but, you know, it seems kind of workable. But let me know if it's a different editor area background, if it's not the MIDI, maybe a sample editor. Let me know. Okay, so just had a couple emails come in from the live stream. Let me just see if there's anything that's kind of relevant. Okay, and this is okay, so just reading kind of so it's from Dwayne. Thank you for working with me on this playback issue that I'm having. This is with the Zoom R24. It's frustrating since I keep trying whatever I can to get things working, and finally gave up on Pro 11 to work on a project and drop back to 10.5 LE where it's presets just fine. Working without issue to give you more detailed ideas what I'm working with. So he sent screenshots. Okay. Just looking through that. Okay. So I'm just looking at some of the screenshots. He said looks like he has his VST connections and a preference set up. Okay. So it just seems like it's getting reset up again. So he's getting a message saying the device ports saved in his preset are already used. So applying this preset will replace any previous connections. So I think what you may be running into is, you know, with a control room, if you have, you know, so it looks like you have the outputs tab selected there. So, you know, once we have our control room set up, so let's say we go to the audio connections. If you have the control room set up for the monitoring, you could have, like, I have my outputs here set up for my stereo output, and I have this chosen to not be connected. Because otherwise, if I have it going through the control room, and you don't have this in the 10.5 LE because it doesn't have the control room functionality, so try to just leave this set here in the control room, and the outputs, leave it to not connected. Because if I kind of change this to the second, and there's a preference for this as well. So say if you go to the control room and you sent a screenshot of your preferences, for exclusive device ports under monitor channel. So if I have this turned on, and let's say I have this set to my control room, all right, so once I uncheck that preference, if I try to assign again, so we get this message, I'm going to make sure that this matches up. Okay. So you may want to, so it's perfectly fine to have this set so that the outputs are set to not connected and the control room is defined there, because otherwise it could send the signal twice and it excuse me, and it could be doubly bust. So let me know if you're trying to just get it set up with the to have it set in the control room, and I'll check your control room picture. Yeah, so if you have your control room set up, it's perfectly fine to not have, if you're trying to set the output channels, you don't have to. And that's going to be kind of a difference between the LE version and what else is going on. Okay, we had another question. It was just emailed during it. Let's see. Okay, so a question, you could always submit these like in the live stream itself, during the live stream. So a question, I've been searching online for my own samples, loops, and such without much success. I get referred to the sample track, but I'm not able to connect the dots on taking a part of a track that I created and make a one-shot or sample to add to my own sample library. As example, I took a cowbell sample and processed it through effects and timing. I would like to make this into a one-shot sample to use later on. I've tried exporting this part and things didn't work out like I wanted, but there must be a simple way to do this. Could you please let me know the easiest way to start making a personal library of created content? Okay, so let's take a quick look at this. All right, so let me just set my preferences back for my color schemes back to default. Okay, so I come here and I have, let's say, this kick, and I wanted to make a sample of just this kick with its processing. So I will just come over here. So let's say I'll just take, so let's say I want to take this kick, and let's say on this kick, I'm going to have different processing. So I'll just come here. So let's say I want to put a short reverb on it. So I will come right over here and let's just grab this. And I'll add just a quick effects channel. Okay, so let's say I wanted to include a sample of that kick drum with the processes. So I'm going to just come over here. I'll select just one of the kick drums. So I will just take my snap off. I'm going to select one of the kick drums here. And let's say I'll just kind of zoom in and say, okay, I want just the attack of that kick. And I'm going to set my left and right locators around that. So if I wanted to just take that particular sample, I could so let's see if I want to, let's say I'll just split this. So I will come over here and So I'm just going to hit, sorry, so take this. All right, and I'm going to, my shift key is acting weird. Okay, so I have that kind of split. So I could just choose to, you know, if you wanted to include the effects, we could just come right over here and just say, okay, I wanted to do my render settings. And I would say, let's do the complete signal path. And this will make a new audio file directly below. So this will be my sample with all of the processing. That could include EQ. All right, so now if I wanted to, I could take this, and we have a sampler track. So now I could just take that with the effects and just have my sample track laid out for me and save that as a preset. So if I just wanted to come right over here, we give it a preset and that will be able to be called in. We could also just open up a, if we have an instance of like Groove Agent, I'll just come over here and I'll cut this particular sample. So I could just come right over here. I'll cut the kit. And if you wanted to just drag it into Groove Agent, you could just trigger it just like that. But you could take just even a portion, you know, if you wanted to take even, let's say, if I go here and I say, I want these 3 kick drums, I could drag those 3 kicks to a Groove Agent pad and choose to layer. So if we're on the, we'll look at instrument to main and mode, we'll just choose layer. And now I could have 3 different kicks, you know, layered together right here. So that won't include the effects, but if you wanted to include all the effects processing, render it to its own file. But you could also just drag and drop audio right into Groove Agent, right into, if you have Hallian, right into the sampler track. And then within the sampler track, you could also add effects directly there, save it as a preset, and it would just be a sampler track preset that you could use in any other project. All right, so thanks for your questions. And again, like during the live stream, you could always just kind of ask the, like in the chat field there, but thanks for the pictures. That was helpful. Okay. All right, so we see, so we're saying Uno Momento saying this month will mark my 32nd year with Cubase. Should I celebrate or should I work hard like crazy? So it's great that you've been able to run it that long. So I'm going on 31. So. Okay, Spacer's question. Is there any option how to resize window of any plugin size window with allowing to resize windows if possible? So it really depends on the plugin itself. Sometimes, you know, it seems like a really obvious thing that, oh, I want every plugin to, you know, be resized. But, you know, that may not work for, you know, the design elements of what the plugin is doing. So some plugins will allow to be resized and some won't. It's really up to the independent plugin. So for instance, if I loaded up something like Hallian, which is designed specifically for this. And so let's say if I wanted to go, you know, load up an instance of Hallian, you know, here, this is kind of, you know, pretty advanced in that I could resize. I could even undock particular parts of the interface if I wanted to. So if I wanted to just kind of come here, we could undock this and break it away from the user interface. So it's really kind of up to the intention and design of the particular plugin. It's not necessarily the host. So I would say most plugins don't allow you to do that. So, but it can be done. Okay, so Michael Pierce is saying, remember there's a like button that likes to be gently shoved, and do it an odd number of times, because if you do it an even number, that will take away your like. So, all right, so we have Laird checking in from Scotland. Thank you for joining. Okay, so we have a question. Let's see if I can find it. Sorry, my chat field jumped on me. So question, greetings. Can we connect a hybrid acoustic guitar, not electric, to Steinberg Cubase? So I'm not sure what you mean by a hybrid acoustic guitar. So, if it's going to be, an acoustic guitar, to record it, you would need a microphone. So many times, often a lot of acoustic guitars now that are used for live performance will have internal electronics, but you say not electric. But you could connect like the output. If the guitar has like a built-in pickup system, you could connect that pickup directly into your audio interface. If you'd ideally want an audio interface that has a high Z input, and that would kind of establish the correct impedance or the levels of resistance, that kind of the signal level that the guitar is outputting. So that may not be exactly what you want to plug into, let's say, a straight mic preamp. Those could be different, but you could connect, so you could record the audio with the microphone, or just take the line out from the pickup and connect that into your audio interface and be able to record those as well. All right, so we see Michael Teams is he's in top form today with his ice cream selections for people. Okay, so I just see I DI record guitars with a modeler insert. I want to give dry channels, but have the modeler baked in. Render in place doesn't have dry with inserts. Export has no inserts only. Is there an easy way? Okay, so if you're recording... All right, so let's say if I was recording a guitar, and let's say I have, go to my audio connections, let's say I have my inputs here. So let's say I'll have this connected. So I'm going to say I'm recording a guitar, and I'll add an audio track this time. That would make more sense. All right, so say, okay, I want to connect my guitar into mono in 1. So if on the input channel of the mix console, so let's say if we're looking at our input channels here, and if we put a effect on the input channel, so let's say if I wanted to put like a guitar modeler, so let's say, okay, I wanted to come here to the VST amp rack. Then now when I come over here, so let's say, okay, this will be our, so if we want this, so if it's on the input channel and it's recorded, at that point, that sound is kind of, baked in. That sound is embedded, like burnt into the file. So we can't undo that processing. So since the sound is kind of burnt in to the processing, at that point, we can't undo it. So if you're doing it from an input channel, most people don't do that, but if you do it that way, we can't undo it. But if we go to the audio track and you're monitoring through a, so say we wanted to monitor through our distortion. So let's say I want it to come here. Let's say, okay, I want to run it through my soft clipper and the VST amp rack. Let's just do the amp rack here for the guitar. That when we do this now, the signal is being processed with these effects. But they're not embedded or burnt in. So if they're put on the input channel, they're burnt in. So if I wanted to apply these and I recorded a guitar part and I wanted to embed those, I would go to my edit to render in place. And I'll just select something else here. Let's just move this down so when I go to render in place, we go to render settings. So if I wanted to have the channel settings, that would include the inserts as well as like the channel EQ and the, and the channel strip. I would select channel settings. If I wanted to include, if I had an effect send with reverb or delay, I would choose the complete signal path. If I wanted to incorporate, my inserts with the sends with, maybe the limiter or maximizer that's on the master channel of the mixer, I would choose complete signal path. So then when I render in place, I could have it be dry with inserts, EQs, and channel strip, adding the effect sends, and then adding also the master effects. So you could kind of have it any way you want. So let me know if that makes sense. Okay, so you see Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. Okay, so you just see, is there a way for Cubase to have folders that collapse and hides tracks in the mixer like some other DAWs? It would allow me to click an icon to show hide tracks in a folder for better organization. So let's say if I'll just revert this project here quickly. So there is a way using kind of the channel visibility that a lot of people miss. So let me just come over here. I'll just okay, so let's say I'm in my mix console view. So, we could come over here. We have our visibility settings. So if I have these in a folder, and you only wanted to see like what's in this particular folder, just hold down the shift key. For some reason, my shift key on my computer is just acting weird today, but just hold down the shift key. And then you can select, and then as you select a folder, it will only show you those items in the mix console. So I say, okay, I want to see all this. I just want to hold down. Let me see if there's something else on my keyboard, but anytime I hold down my shift key, it's kind of like, sorry about that, it's annoying. So now I could just do that. So if I'm on a larger project, so let's say if I go here, this will probably have lots of folders. So I go to the visibility, I say, okay, I only want to see percussion. And then when I go to my mix console, or I only want to see background vocals. So you could just kind of come over here and just say, okay, I just want to see my print horns. I'm going to try turning my keyboard on and off real quick here. See if I get it to cooperate a little better. Let's see if there's anything else open on my Mac. All right. So just come over here and just hold down the shift key, and then you could also just come over here and, you know, if you wanted to go to different configurability options, you could just say, okay, I want to see, you know, all tracks. So you could just kind of, you know, okay, I only want to see guitars. Boom. Just kind of click and say, okay, now I only want to see guitars. So it's just going to be shift. And then it's only your guitars that you see in the mix console. So give that a shot. I know it's probably a bit different than other programs, but I think it gets you there pretty quickly in the long run. Okay, let's read through some more questions. All right, so I just see when will Cubase 12 be coming out? Will it work better with the Reason rack? Reason 12 just came out in Cubase. So, you know, we haven't announced when Cubase, you know, when in new versions, we generally don't announce in advance. So, but I'm sure, you know, developers are always constantly working on stuff. So I'm not sure. I haven't heard of any issues with Reason Rack. So using it, you know, you could just kind of use it as a, you know, basically just as a VST instrument now inside of Cubase, finally. Okay, so so I could just see, you know, further questions on the channels in the mixer. So, you know, the one setting that you might want to look at is you could choose to synchronize the project and the mix console. So you could just do this for the lower zone. So now when you come over here, so any of those selections will automatically carry over from the project window into the mix console, and those could be done independently for each of the lower zone mixer or for the three independent mix or two mixers here as well. So once we go into the studio, you could have you know, each of these three mix consoles can have independent channel configurations as well. Okay, hi Greg. Question: when recording an audio, I don't see any waveform representations, but after I stop recording, I see the waveform display on the take I just recorded. What's a solution? So it could be just a preference. So, and this is a preference from old days when computers couldn't really draw the waveforms well. So I think if we go to preferences, let's go to record to audio. There's a preference here for create audio images during record. So maybe if you try to make sure that that preference is checked, if that's unchecked, then that could make a difference. And if we're doing, like, I'm not sure if you're recording within just check, because sometimes there's a MIDI for MIDI parts. There's if you have the editor open, you may have to just have the record in editor option checked, but just make sure that preference is enabled. So again, create audio images during record. So check that. Okay, so we're saying some discussion on the render in place for the guitar part that we were previously discussing. Says I want to bake the inserts in, but not the channel settings. This would enable giving the project to another mix engineer who doesn't have my modeler. So what you could do is at that point, if you wanted to do a render in place, but to have the inserts, which will include that, just come and not the EQ, just bypass the EQ and bypass the channel strip right before you render it. And then those won't be included. So at this stage, if you had a bunch of effects on your channel strip and you had all the EQ set up, just bypass those two and then render in place. And then your inserts will be rendered, but not the channel strip or the EQs. All right, so we see from Taylor Sapp, just thanks for the multi-page score export tip. That'll be a big time saver. So yeah, you're welcome. Glad we could help. All right, so we have a question from Monk Beats. I need a macro to bounce all clips on one audio track in one key click. Glue all audio clips on track and bounce and maybe replace. Is it possible? So, you could also just, so let's say, all right, so I wanted to So I wanted to get these audio files here bounced down to one single file. You could just do this with render in place quickly. And if you are doing this a lot, just kind of leave it with the render settings. But once we come over here, I can say, okay, I want channel settings. And we could just say mix down to one file. So if you kind of do this a lot, just say, okay, I want to do this as separate events. And I just say render, and then it'll mix down all of these guitar parts down to one stereo file for us and just import it directly underneath. So that's a combination. So you could just select those and just do a render in place. And, next time if you need to do that again, you could just say, okay, I just want to reuse the same settings, and you could call that up with a keyboard shortcut but when you do the render settings, just choose to mix down to one audio file. You could give it a name, whatever you want, or if you just wanted to call that function up, you could do that as well, but it's a pretty fast way to do it. All right, so we see from the Monk Beats, the solution for the 0 seconds with the bars offset is perfect for me. Thank you. I'm glad it was an easy solution. So all the offsets with, do you want to move this? Are you sure you want to move this? Sometimes can be a little tricky, but I think once you kind of get the hang of it and get your routine, everything is good. Okay, so I see, hi, in C11, is there a way to select a channel from the channel edit window like we used to? So let's say if I jump here, let me just try it on a... All right, so we could kind of navigate here. So, if you just wanted to, all right, so this is our input channel. So this input was feeding 21 targets. And so once I'm kind of here, so you can navigate pretty quickly, but so If you just wanted to say, okay, go to the stereo out, these are all the sources that are feeding the stereo out. All the sources are feeding this particular group. So you could try and kind of navigating in here, because you could say, okay, this input is feeding this track, but this input is, and that is, so this is going to 21 targets. So we could say, okay, let's see our 21 targets and just say, okay, now I want to see that target. So you can navigate pretty quickly there for inputs and outputs to find other channels in your particular project. All right, so we see Nick on the live stream, just saying, what did he miss? So, all right, so we just see, does anyone knows where I could get a full in-depth Cubase course online? So I think, if you watch a lot of these, just go watch the Club Cubase tutorials. And if you have particular questions, instead of like learning a bunch of stuff that you may not use, I would always say, figure out one thing that you want to do, figure that out well, and it's like, and then figure out another thing, and figure out that one thing well, because you may spend 5 hours in notation on a full Cubase course and it's not applicable for your needs. So use the CubaseIndex.com site. And as you're learning something, just kind of learn one thing at a time, and then you'll just be able to kind of think of it like, learning an instrument or putting together a Lego set. And you say, oh, I learned mixing, I learned automation, I learned routing, I learned this. And then you put those pieces of Legos, and all of a sudden you built the Saturn V rocket in Legos, and you'll be a powerful Cubase user. And check out the Cubase Nation Discord. All right, so we have Raphael Gruber joining us as well. Okay. Okay, so Ralphio is saying he likes just likes watching the videos, and know he's running Logic and Pro Tools, and says just something about touch automation not working. So if you could let us know what in touch automation isn't working the way you want, I'd be happy to show you. All right, so we have a question. What is the amount of compressor used for Kickstarter? So it's going to vary on every single project. So, if what samples are being used, are the samples themselves already been processed? So there's no real, it's like what EQ is used on everything. It's going to be different for every single source. So it's really hard to answer that. So, and I think if you think of mixing as like, I always do this to this, that it's not the best approach, because I always try to take every song and treat it differently. I mean, we all learn tips and tricks that we know that gets us to the finish line on a particular thing, but it's really hard to just kind of answer that. So, but if you have an example of a project you want to send me, we could, I could, give you some settings of what I would do in that particular situation. All right, so we see DJ Ice is saying, hey, Greg, I'm watching on a big screen. That's good. My screen's not so big. I just have like a 27-inch monitor and a little Surface Go tablet for my chat. So I'm envious. All right. Okay, so I just see this from Raphael, just say I'm waiting for Steinberg fixing the automation touch mode. So, if you have, if it's kind of like a touch mode thing, and I know this could work differently. So let's say if I have just like this track here going on. And if you don't have, I'll just do something that may not have automation. So let's say if I wanted to do touch automation on this, so I would just kind of come here. So let me just do this on something else that doesn't have existing automation. So let's say if I would just want to go to quick loop. Okay. All right, so let's say we just now want to come over here, and let's say I have no automation, and I wanted to write automation. So when it's in touch automation mode, some people, and just like a real fader, like until you touch, as soon as we let go, it's going to automatically go back. Now, if you wanted to do like quick, like, if you have automation here, we could also, and some people want it to go back to the existing value, but just like a real fader doesn't jump back. But if you wanted to do just a quick, like, touch automation, like, okay, like this, this syllable on a vocal is a little too soft or too loud. You could do that, but if you want it to go back to, let's say, the existing value, so let's say if I'm here and I'm doing touch automation, if you have this set up in the touch automation panel, you could just say, right to end. So as soon as we come over here, so we're just going to say right to start and end. So as soon as I do this, it'll now put my automation values in. So if I wanted to do like a little bump up here, it will go back. So let's say if I just have this automation written to the end here. So now it'll just kind of revert back because there's a value for it to revert back to when you do touch automation. So, you could just, touch the fader and do a to start and to end, and that puts the automation value at the end. But if a lot of people have kind of migrated away from that, and they'll just kind of come over here and just say, oh, I just wanted that to be up a little bit, that to be down a little bit. And if I needed to just kind of take this and tweak it and then put, even just say, okay, now I just want to put my Bezier curve in there. We could do stuff like that as well. So, but let me know if there's a specific touch automation thing that you're running into, if it's not that. All right, so we have DJ Ice checking in from Haiti. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question from Sable. In preferences editing MIDI, what scenario would I tick split MIDI controllers? Okay, so let's say I'm going to add a quick instrument track here. And let's say I just have some long notes here. Okay, so, and we'll just kind of make this a little bigger so we could see them. Okay, so let's say at this point, we go to the preference and we go to editing, to MIDI, and I don't have split MIDI events enabled. So when I cut a part and let's say erase the part, these MIDI notes will still be there and they'll continue because we haven't chosen to end those notes. Those notes will last, even though this part isn't visible. So now, if I have that preference enabled, so we say split MIDI events. So we enable that, and I choose to split with the scissors tool. At this point, I erase, and then those events, let me just make sure I set the preference right. So now when I go to erase the events, those events there will be, the MIDI notes will follow the events here. So, and this is also useful, like if we have a part and we say, okay, now I just want it to take this part in the middle and copy that a bunch of times. So now when we look at these parts, we can see that this would all be, we just, that as we looked at it, the parts that were split, we'll now see that the length of the event on the project window will now affect the length of the note in the MIDI editor itself. All right, so we see from DW Capture, Cubase looks nice. I'm considering purchasing for comparing to FL Studio. I've been using for years. I want to upgrade. I got an upgrade code, so it should take me from a really old version of Cubase to current. So yeah, take advantage of it. So it's a wonderful program. We would love to have you as a user. Okay. Okay, so I just see I have a question about multi-output to separate tracks from a plug-in instrument and also be able to record on those tracks. My issue is with the XO plugin specifically. When I do it, I don't get the record option. Okay, so one thing that you could do is I don't have, I'm not sure if it's what the XO plugin is, but let's say if I had, I'll jump here to this project. Okay, so let's say if I have like a drum part here, and we're gonna have multi-outs. So I have this event, let's say just on my project window here. Let me just, okay, so you may not have to actually record the outputs here. So let's say okay, so I have this, and let's say as I play this pattern, okay, so we're gonna play this, and I'm gonna take like a multi-out of this instrument. So I'm gonna come over here, and let me just, okay, so what I'm going to do is everything's going out of kind of like a stereo out. So I'm just going to say we're going to take this out of output 2, my snare out of output 3, my hi-hat out of output 4, let's say my room, output 5 and output 6. So when we do this now, these have been kind of split out into our different channels of our mix console. So now that this instrument, well, one part is going to multi-outs, instead of having to record it, what you could do is just come right over here and just do a render in place. So say, okay, I just want to come here. I want to take these and we'll say, okay, we're just going to use like our channel settings and I'll just say render. And now we could have the kick, the snare, the hi-hat, all of the different, the room, the overheads, all rendered as separate files. So, so you may not have to, so if you want to do the multi-output instrument to separate tracks in your plugin, you could probably just do it like that. So let me know if that makes sense, or if I misunderstood, let me know. All right, and we have Peter checking in from Montreal, Canada. Glad you could join us again. Okay, so we have Hello World just saying, can I submit a question? So yeah, just ask your question directly in the chat field where you type that. All right, we see JVI, and if you show up late, we realize that, you know, people are working and, you know, have stuff to do, so you don't have to apologize. We're not in school. But I appreciate it. It's a nice gesture, but. Okay, so just seeing, oh, someone wishing my voice audio level is a little higher, so I'll adjust it up. All right. Try to get closer to the mic as well. All right. All right, so we see David Griffiths is also that bar and timecode offset was something I always wanted to know, Greg. Thanks a lot. Thanks a million. You're welcome. Glad you learned something new. All right, so I just see, how can I get the bounce effect of Eventide Instant Flanger with Cubase's stock flanger? So I'm not familiar with the sound of the, you know, the instant flanger, but let's say if I just wanted to, we'll just revert to this quickly. So I could take a listen to it. If you want to send me like maybe an audio example, that would be helpful, but I don't know, just kind of off the top, just from reading the description of it. I mean, I worked with 2290s and stuff a lot in the past. But let's say if I just wanted to, we'll try, I'll kind of guess, but let's say we'll just kind of, so I don't know if it's like a fast time. But if you could give me some context of kind of what the flanger is, I'm not sure if it's the instant flanger is just kind of a short. I think I have maybe some of the Eventide plugins on my personal studio system, but not on this. But I could take a look at it. But if maybe you could be a little more descriptive, that might help me. I might be able to kind of find it. Okay, so we're seeing other people are not having problems with hearing me speak, so that's good. All right. All right, great to see Charles K from the UK in the live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I just see, so question, visibility window cannot be stretched to view full names and tracks, seems locked. So there will be, you know, I think it is kind of for this particular size, but let's see if it's, so yeah, it is kind of a fixed size. So, you know, if you have a track, but that has like really long names, you know, it may truncate the name somewhat, but sometimes when you do this, it's like, you know, making this longer, you know, it could have all sorts of ripple effects of being able to affect the visibility of other aspects. But this is a fixed size for the visibility tab in the inspector. Okay, so we just see from Cedric. So he's checking in from India. Thanks for joining. Okay, so I saw JVI saying, Greg, I'm not a drummer, but saw an opportunity to buy a cheap electrical drum set for $5 and thought, why not and have some fun? There's one problem. The drum set does not send MIDI to PC. Instead, it sends game controller data to the PC via USB. Can Cubase 11 translate the game controller data to MIDI info? If no, any ideas? I want to say that there are some translation tools for this. You know, generally, you know, Cubase is set up to record as a MIDI sequencer. And I assume that if you got it for $5, it doesn't have multiple outputs. But I want to say that you know, the gaming community is kind of full of hacks. So there's probably, I don't think Cubase has an internal tool to take the game controller, but there's probably a translation utility that may. So, you know, we see kind of the gaming community is kind of full of people that, you know, love to kind of do these, you know, DIY projects and come up with solutions for scenarios like this. So I want to say that, you know, you could probably maybe find something online, but I don't think Cubase has anything to work with the, you know, the as game controllers for sequencing. All right. So we have someone checking in from Augsburg. Thanks for joining. And also from Lowe's in South UK. Okay, reading through more comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so seeing some discussion on different drum libraries. still more comments on programming drums with electronic drum kits. Okay, so we have a question. It says, I got a question if you have time. When you colorize MIDI note events for scale and chords, how does it establish what scale you are using? Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I want to come up to, I'm going to generate the chords based on this a chord track based on that piano part. Okay, so when we do this, you may notice that the chord track will automatically assign a scale kind of based upon the chords that are being used. That scale could be hidden if you don't click on this little icon within the chord track. And that is the basis for the colors. So now if I wanted to, we'll go into a full screen MIDI editor. And at this point, I can choose to colorize by scale and chords, and then we could see everything that's going to be within the scale and within the chords directly right here. So it's going to be, as soon as we do this, it's going to automatically look for the scale that's been generated right here. So just make sure that, and then you'll see that scale right there. Okay. All right. Just had a message that came in. Let me just read it real quick. Okay. Okay, just going through some more questions here, or some more reading through comments. All right, so we just see how are you sending the audio out to OBS, loopback, or via something like Restream? So what I'm doing is I take my audio output of my audio interface that Cubase is using, and I combine that. I send the analog output of that into, I have a Yamaha MG10XU mixer. I just switched mixers last week. So I use the Yamaha MG10XU mixer, and then I have my microphone connected to that. So my OBS is just sees everything coming from my Yamaha mixer, and Cubase is seeing everything from its own audio interface, and that's what I use to kind of toggle back and forth between the two programs. So OBS is using the MG10XU as its audio interface, and we're using the Cubase is using a UR24C interface. All right, so just see from Renee just saying the hub's news and tutorial section is not showing up either. So I thought mine was showing up earlier, but let me just try it again, see if I do a new project, if it's connecting. So connected there for a second. but I think mine has been showing up sometimes if I'm doing this with the live stream on, but I'll just do it one more time. So we do new project, connecting. So did connect there for a second, but I think before this live stream, mine was doing it, but I could check some more after the live stream if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so I just see from Sable Winters, thanks, Greg. Would you further explain the set split MIDI controllers function? So let's say if I'll just add another instrument track. Let's say I had long MIDI notes here, and let's say if I have controllers such as modulation, okay, I'll just extend this over. So, all right, so now we say we have our modulation. So let's say now I want it to split right here. So I'm going to enable the preference. Let's jump to MIDI, and now we'll say split MIDI controllers. So we'll say apply. So now as soon as I cut, let's say right in the middle here, that MIDI CC point that wasn't there at the end automatically puts an end point and a beginning point on this part. So now when I move this, if that wasn't activated, it would just automatically not affect the controllers, but just move the part, but the controllers would still be there. But as soon as I split the events, it'll just automatically add the controller point. So I'm going to put it right here. And now let's say split right at that point. It'll add that node right there so that we have the controller at the beginning and at the end of the event. All right, just let me read through a couple questions here. I'm going to respond to a text that was coming in. Bear with me just a second, sorry. Okay, so all right, so we see Banquet just saying he just bought Groove Agent in the summer sale, so this is useful. So yeah, I think there's one more day for the end of summer sale, so make sure that you take advantage of that if you're looking for different instruments or Wavelab Cast or Dorco, I think is all in there. Okay, so I just see the bounce effect for the flanger is the sound of the capstan looking for the right time when releasing your finger from the capstan while doing tape flanging. All right, so let me just... see if I can find an appropriate file here. I might have something we could show with. I'll see if I can play around with the plugin at home, but I think it's just going to be maybe the speed control of it. So like when you do tape flanging, you know, you just put your thumb on the tape. So let me just. Okay, so I'll just kind of. Okay, so let's say I take this. So if we take this probably off of sync. And then you could probably just kind of, you know, because as you're doing that, you're just kind of changing the time. But I'll see if I could find that particular, if it's a preset. But I think if you just kind of take it off of sync, that you'll get kind of the timing values for the rates, not in actual times, but rather in milliseconds. And then you could kind of automate that to kind of find that sweet spot for the time. All right, so we had Michael Romanowski, I think, is joining us, and he had emailed a question. So let me see if I could help him with this. He's in the middle of a session, so... So I need to speed up files in the Atmos project exactly 2 beats per minute to match an adjusted stereo track. How can I make all the files in the project adjust pool and tempo? So let's say if I wanted to come here, let's go to this file here. So if you don't have, what you need to do is first to assign, if you don't have a tempo for the audio file itself, you know, if you know what kind of the source tempo is for the audio file. Okay, let me just, okay, so let's say we have a project here and we wanted to change the beats per minute up a couple BPM. So what we want to do is to make sure that we go into the pool file. So go to media to pool, and you want to select all of the audio files. And as we work with this, we're going to select all of our files. We want to, and you could just type in the tempo for one of the files. So if you know that you're at 100 and you need to be at 102, and we can think of this as kind of like the source tempo. So the original tempo. So type in the original tempo, and that will apply that value to all of the files that are selected. And then you also will see this musical. Make sure that musical mode is turned on. So once we have those two things, you'll probably see that we'll see this little icon in the upper right-hand corner. So if I wanted to change the tempo, let's say from 100 to 102 to match the other track, I could just come over here, and just now that this is in musical mode, I could type in whatever tempo I want. So if I want to go 20 beats a minute faster or 2 beats a minute faster than the original. So we go back to our original time, or if I want to go to 96, we could slow it down just a little bit. So once you go into the pool, come right over here, and I will, select all the files. If they don't have the tempo stamp, just type in kind of the origin tempo, and that will be the, and if you don't know kind of what the origin tempo is, if it's kind of playing back at a steady tempo, then, you could just say, okay, this is my BPM of that. And if you don't have a steady BPM, one that's fluctuating, you can do a tempo detection. So let's say, if it's a steady tempo, just type in the tempo value, and then at that point you can just take it up 2 beats per minute like that. But if it's fluctuating in tempo, so let's say if I come over here and I had a multi-track project where the band didn't record to a click, I will just come over here and you could find the original tempo of like the of the source audio file if you wanted to. But let's say if you wanted to do this where we had like a full band and the band was speeding up and slowing down, and there's no correlation between the two, so here I'll just take like an overhead track and I will do a tempo detection of this. Okay, so this will give me a signature track of, let's say, 1/4, and give me a tempo track. So I'm going to go ahead and just listen to this. Let's see, okay, and just got another text from Michael with this. So if the stereo file, and he was just saying that the stereo file needs to stay the same. So if you want the stereo file to stay the same, at that point, select the stereo file, and then you'll see musical mode. Uncheck musical mode just for that file. And then when you change the tempo, the original file won't change, just the other tracks that are set to musical mode. So we could come right over here and just select all the tracks except for the reference track, Michael. And at this point, we could just put those into musical mode. The tracks that you want to stay the same, leave those in non-musical mode. But getting back to, for other people who are watching, if we now wanted to take this tempo, so let's say we have our tempo map here. We could also just say, okay, I want to take these tempos, and we could select all of the files in the project, and let's say they're all set to musical mode. And at this point, we could do advanced to set definition from tempo. And what this will do is when we have the tempo map, this will take the varying tempos. And when we do the set definition from tempo, and again, this is under audio to advanced, set definition from tempo, that will take this tempo map and embed the tempo map into the files. And at that point, once you place it into, now when you change the tempo, all of those files can change in a multi-track environment. So if you have the tracks that you don't want to change, just select that, and you can do it even from the project window, and don't enable musical mode. So hopefully that helps, Michael. Glad we could help you out and without interrupting the live stream, and have you join the live stream. And if that helps, you have to hit the like button. And I hope you're well, and I'll send you an email with the other thing that you mentioned in the email. So hope you're doing well. Okay. Okay, so I just see what's the easiest way to edit out skips in your track with other than SpectralLayers for skips. So I'm not sure if it's like if it's skipping parts or if there's clicks and pops. You know, if you have clicks and pops, you could use SpectralLayers for that. But if it's like skipping in time, I don't know much that can do it unless you have that a recording of the same part from a different part of the song, maybe. But you know, if you could let us know, Kevin, what skips you mean, that would be great to know. Okay, we're just reading through some more questions. Okay. All right, we see that Gareth is on the live stream, so thanks for joining. All right, so we see that we have some nefarious people, but Jazz Dude, I know I could remove the person. Just a quick point. I know I'm well behind, but I know I could remove the person. If you could leave one of them in after the live stream, I can't remove them if there isn't a comment. So maybe if they do it again, you could just maybe leave one in, and then I could remove them from the channel. Sorry about that. And thank you for your moderation. Okay, just reading through more comments. All right, so we're just saying someone wants to hear my music, Greg. So I don't really compose, but I did play bass on with Michael Teams and Pablo and Gareth on a track on an album. You could look up Hot Mess, HOTTMESS. So I didn't write, or I just was a lowly bass player, but it was fun. So you could check that out. All right, so I just see should console emulation plugins like Slate Digital VCC be pre or post fader? So I think it's fine to run it either way. So I don't think it's as critical whether you're running pre or post fader, but just kind of be aware of it. You know, but I don't think it's gonna be like, you know, oh, it's so wrong to do it pre fader or post fader. So and if you're running it as a insert, you know, so you know, but there's no real right or wrong way to do it. So whatever kind of works for you. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. You see Tim Weinheimer got some of the drum expansions on the summer sale. Okay, so I see a question. Hi, Greg. Why I have audio crackles when using Cubase while connected to the internet at the same time? So it could be, make sure that, sometimes you may, if you're, it could be that your Ethernet card is causing interruptions. It's a pretty common thing that sometimes, when we're dealing with, audio interfaces and real time audio performance, that certain things, video cards can often cause it, or Ethernet network controllers can be causing it. So Wi-Fi is kind of a notorious thing that could affect and interrupt the real-time processing needed for audio. You could use a utility like DPC latency checker, and that may kind of, if you turn on and off, and it could be that basically that your Wi-Fi or your Ethernet connection, is when the audio needs to be doing stuff, that it's kind of interrupting the audio stream. So, it could be a driver update that fixes it, or maybe going for a simpler driver. So I see Jazz Dude's kind of mentioning the same thing. Okay, just reading through more questions here. All right, so I just see we have a vocal recorded live with an overdrive pedal. Is there a way of cleaning the vocal track to enable us to hear the vocalist lyrics? The only thing, it's going to be a tough thing to do. So, but you might be able to. We discussed this on, I think, on the last live stream as well. But let's. Let me just. I'll just do a new project here. So probably like the only thing that could really help with this okay, so let's say, we have our vocal track here. All right, so I'm just gonna render this quickly. in, sorry, I'll just redo that real quick, sorry.
Of yourself.
All right, so say if we have maybe something like this, we'll give this a shot. Okay, so let's say we have maybe something like that. Let's see. The only thing I could think of that you might have to spend some time and kind of tweak these settings is if you go to audio and if you go like a tool like SpectralLayers. And then there is like some like clip repair. So if you wanted to, we could preview this. We'll try it. And this is intended like in case you kind of overdid the converter. But kind of, it could be really tricky, and I think the analogy I mentioned last Tuesday's live stream was, it's kind of like unburning a steak. But this might help. Let's take a quick look. Yeah, so it's not clipping, but, so that may be something to try, and even if you don't want to invest in it, you could get the, maybe the trial version and play around with it some. Okay. Okay, so we see where's the arrow to go back to the beginning of the song? How do you rewind? All right, so let's come over here. As soon as we just come here, go to the transport, you'll probably see 4 bars. Go to where you see the 3 dots on the right, and then you can just see rewind, fast forward will become visible. So, or go to next marker. So just come right there. And then you could adjust accordingly. Okay, going through some more questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Jan. On Groove Agent 5 says, when loading more slots, the question, loading the kit, overwrite the global settings, lock or overwrite. I don't understand the question. So I think what this is, so let me just load up two big Groove Agent kits. So generally you could overwrite. So let's load up a kit with patterns. We'll do. Okay, so when we do this, we can see that we have kind of, a lot of samples loaded up here with the percussion agent. And when we go to our options here, we can see that we have 1200 megabytes for preload amount. So if I go to load up a couple of other kits, so let's say I just wanted to do like a Simon Phillips studio drums kit. I'll just come right over here and this may trigger the message. Okay, so so here you could just choose. So this is with the pattern settings. So I'm going to overwrite the settings. So if you're going back and forth, let's say between the patterns, and we go to, let's say we go to our pattern mode here. And we see overview that some of these patterns, may not line up. So that allows you to have, I think, the patterns for each of the kits maintained. So, so I think it's just dealing with the patterns. And if you're not interacting with the patterns together for multiple agents, that I think you'll be okay with that. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussions. Okay, so we have silly questions. Is there a Control Z undo function in SpectralLayers? So let's go ahead and do a function here. So let's say okay, so I think if you just go to within SpectralLayers, that you could just undo directly right from within SpectralLayers. So just go to this little edit menu there, and then you can have its own undo history. All right, so I think I'm almost caught up. We'll just kind of take a, I know we had a couple questions that were sent in, not a lot. All right. Okay, so I think we're almost at the point where I'm finally caught up with the different questions. All right, so we see Faces Forever just saying hey. Okay, so let me go to migrate to some of the questions that were mailed in. We had just a couple, wasn't a lot for this session. Thanks for all the great questions and comments. All right, so last time we had a question. I did some research on it, and I'll just find a better file for this about the different options for the flip channels. So I will come over here. Let me just find a quick stereo track. Okay. And I'll revert this particular project here. Okay, so let's say we have like our stereo file, and the question was, when we do like the stereo flip, what the different options were. So I'm going to come over here. We'll go to our processes and then stereo flip. Okay, so one is going to be flip left to right, and so this will be taking the left channel and then just kind of, I'll just make this really a bit larger so maybe we could kind of get a sense of, maybe it's a little easier. So if I just say flip left to right, that takes the right channel and then flips it just like that. If we wanted to come over here, and we choose left to stereo, this is going to duplicate the left channel onto both. Sorry, just had a quick message. So you could just say this will take the left channel and double it. So as soon as we do that, and we could take the right channel and double the right channel. So we'll undo that. And the one that kind of got me a little confused last week was so say our stereo flip. So we could merge both of them together so that it'll kind of almost for mono capabilities. So that will take almost like summing it to mono and then doubling it if you want it to. And then the last one would be the subtract, and this would subtract the left channel from the right channel. So this could sometimes be used for like isolating vocals. So if you wanted to just kind of do that and listen to it, so that's everything that's everything is in the left channel, then the difference with the right channel. And if you wanted to go back to where we were, you could just kind of undo right at that point. Okay, so, and we had a question also mailed in. When importing WAV files, WAV files is also given a BPM value in the media pool. Is it calculated? Is it a calculated BPM value or value that Cubase performs? So a lot of times when you import WAV files, especially loops, these particular loops will often have, and you could often see it in the name of the loop. So often within the naming conventions of the loop, there will be a BPM, and then as soon as I would drop that in, Cubase would know what the tempo is, either extracted directly from the name or if it's in the metadata of the file. So unless you manually assign the tempo, Cubase won't do that. If you do a tempo detection of it, you could embed it in using the pool window, but Cubase won't automatically do that for you unless you tell it to. So if you just come over here, you can say, okay, this, since that had the tempo in it, so you see 125 BPM, 125 BPM, that means that it will automatically respond to musical mode once you're doing that. So, but Cubase doesn't automatically do that. It's just extracting the information. A lot of times, if that information is there, it's kind of often indicates that it's a loop and that you may want it to fit your project tempo. It's kind of customer and user expectations. Okay. So, and the second part of this question is, if calculated, is it possible to disable the BPM calculation in the media pool? My wish is that it can cause mistakes and problems in the project when you put the file in musical mode, or if I miss something. So since it's not being calculated, if you didn't want it to have an effect, you just don't place the track itself into musical mode. So since it's not being actually calculated, so if you drop it in, you could disable musical mode very easily. Okay, and we see third part of the question, can WAV files be provided with metadata as MP3 files? So yeah, so as soon as we go to like a WAV file here, and if we wanted to look at the metadata, you could see it in like a pool window. So let's say I just wanted to go to, let's say, but so if I just wanted to come here, like, all right, so I'll go to the right-hand zone here. So as soon as you select the WAV file, here's where you could put in like a lot of different metadata that would be kind of carried over into the file. So if you just select it in the media bay, the full media bay, you'll see this right zone. And if you wanted to add your own, add other forms of other fields that are typically used, or create your own fields, you could do that as well. All right, we'll go back to our live questions here. And we did have one question that was kind of mailed in with about choking cymbals. It's pretty involved in choking cymbals between a Roland drum kit and Superior Drummer 3. So I will take a look at it over the weekend. I'll get my electronic kit hooked up into my personal studio and take a look at it and see if I could figure it out. But one thing to check on that was, I'm not sure if Superior Drummer can run as standalone, but if you see, if it does run as standalone, if as you play it, you get the same choking behavior with it. But I'll kind of respond via email for that. All right, so let's go back to our live questions. All right, so we see Graham Witcher is able to make it today. So I see, will Nuendo keep track of SpectralLayers history? I think Nuendo and Cubase would treat it the same way. So let me just come over here real quick and we'll try just... I'll just open this as in SpectralLayers, but I don't think it's going to be, since it's ARA2, that it will, any edits that we do. I guess it, so it's just going to do loading up the SpectralLayers extension, but not necessarily within the SpectralLayers. So it would be kind of treated via ARA2 to automatically go back and forth, and you could use the edit history within ARA2. So I think Nuendo and Cubase would treat it the same way. All right, and we see David M. checking in from Liverpool. We see Michael Pierce has made it back. Okay, so we have a question from Matt Elston. Greg, I really like the drum patterns in the Rock and Pop toolbox, where they are described as intro or verse A or verse chorus, etc. Is there an expansion pack you can recommend, please? So I haven't gone through, like, if you're looking for more patterns and stuff. So, depending, some of the ones that I really like, if I would say if you're looking for just like wonderful, wonderful drums and a wonderful drum performance, the Simon Phillips stuff. If you're looking for sounds as well as patterns, these are pretty amazing. If you're looking for like the drum agent, the groove agent kits. So, if you wanted to come over here, you could just, one is you have Simon Phillips actually kind of playing on your tracks, and the fact that, you have kind of your different levels. So, some of these are, so I'll just load a kit with some patterns here. and so many different options for, 3 snares that you could use quite easily, octobons, gong toms. So these could be like really pretty spectacular grooves. If you wanted something that was, more, maybe we like progressive rock stuff, the Marco Miniman stuff, I think is really pretty exceptional too. So if you wanted to come here, we'll just start with like a fast rock kit here. But I think some of these patterns are really pretty spectacular as well. But if you wanted to do, and even if you wanted to do more complex stuff, this is probably, you gotta love presets from drum patterns that say count that. So And there's also, I'm not sure if I have it on this, but the Nashville drums are quite nice as well. I may not have it installed, but you know, those are some great ones to work with. You know, you get two wonderful drummers with kind of their signature kits. All right, so we see that Pablo has joined the live stream. Glad you could join in. Okay, just reading through comments. So everyone's happy that Pablo has joined in. So we see Michael Pierce saying, "Ooh, revelation of the day! I've never seen a metadata editor in MediaBay, so it's a good one." Okay, so we had a question. Greg, can you show how to step MIDI input one melodic line, then adding another melodic line, blending it, like two-part writing? Okay, so let's come over here. I'll just I'll just do new project here. Try one more sound, see. Okay, so let's say I just want to do counterpoint with step input. Okay, so I'm going to enable step input here. I'll just start off with some half notes. Okay, so let's say I'll just do. All right, and let's say I wanted this to be eighth notes. So let me just, sorry, my keyboard is not behaving well today. I'm just going to start over because I did quarter note, half note triplets instead. So let me just do half notes. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say I have that as kind of like one voice, and I wanted to do another voice on top. So let's say, and I'll switch rhythms here to, let's say, eighth notes. Sorry, my control key isn't working on my computer today, or my command key. So we could do. So I'm not a composer, but you know, you could just kind of come over here and just kind of put in different rhythmic values. So you say, okay, this I want it to be, you know, eighth note triplets. You can just kind of come right over there and be able to, and I have some of my different keys that are mapped for generic remote, but that's how you can do kind of a polyphonic step entry, and you just kind of double click wherever you want the notes to start being inputted from, and that will set the location. Okay, so I just see, can you show possibilities by using audio loops from native instruments? I don't have any native instruments audio loops on this computer, so I think I might have some on others, but so I don't really have any to show on this computer. But if there's anything you want to see with audio loops by themselves, I'd be happy to kind of take to show you if you have a particular question on using loops or getting them to fit. Okay, so we just see, so I see Dan Freeman is about the question about Superior Drummer. So, you know, see if, you know, if you're not running Cubase, if the choking behavior works between just the MIDI from your Roland MIDI kit to the Superior Drummer, if the choking is kind of functioning as expected. But that would be interesting to know. Okay, so we have I see a question from JVI. If I record a MIDI part at 100 BPM, is there a fast way to imprint that to the MIDI file, like the Media Bay BPM? So if I drag it into a different project at different BPM, the file will work correctly. So pretty much there, you know, MIDI will do that by default, unless you have the MIDI track. So let's say if I, we'll just start off with some MIDI loops here. So I'll jump back to, so let's say I just do like a drum pattern here. Okay, so let's say and this is a MIDI loop, so when I drag this in, let's say now my tempo is, I'll switch from 120 to 100 beats per minute, and now you'll see that even in preview that will automatically just drag and drop right in. If I take this particular, let's say I create a part here, and I'll just go to my drum part. Okay, so let's say if I just, all right, so let's say if I just have this little part, all right, and I will just kind of put in a quick, all right, so let's say I have, all right, world's worst drum beat. All right, so I will come over here and I'll just save this within a particular part. Okay, so now I will just come right over here. So we're going to take a look at this. I'll do a new project. So we're at 100 BPM. I'll do a new project. Let's create empty. I may have to save the old one first. Okay, so I'm going to save this. Okay, so now I'll do new project. And let's say on our new project, our tempo is 120 beats a minute. So when we go to import tracks from project, so to import that drums with the events, that now when we play it, it puts it at measure 10, we're at 120 beats a minute. So unless the MIDI track itself is set to linear mode, then now if this is set to linear mode and I change the tempo from 120 to 100, at that point it's not going to be kind of on the grid. So it's going to play back the same. But if it's set to musical mode versus linear mode, that will automatically just kind of follow kind of right in the tempo right there. So, you know, the MIDI doesn't have to be tempo stamped because it's kind of, we'll consider it tempo malleable by default, unless you tell that not to actually fall, to only be in linear mode. So that's why you usually don't see tempo stamps on MIDI, because it'll automatically just kind of fit. All right. So we see, hey, Greg, in a VST remote session and a client has a MacBook, but it is delaying a few beats. So when you're doing, if it's like a VST Connect session, Grant, and it's great to see you on the live stream. I hope you're doing well. So let's come over here to the VST Connect Cloud. So let's say we kind of set this up, and this may seem a bit counterintuitive once we do this, but if we set that up, try not to monitor the performer record track. So, because otherwise you may be hearing kind of the round trip latency. So try just not to enable the monitor on that, but just record it, and then it gets monitored through the control room, and see if that works for you. So. Okay, so we have a question from Keith Young. Do all stock plugins in Cubase 11 have the same reset method? Thanks. Especially the multi-band EQs, etc. So I believe they do. So if you wanted to just come over here and let's say we'll just get to our audio inserts, and I will have let's go to frequency, which is a multi-band EQ. So as I come over here, let's say we're just adjusting our different bands accordingly. So holding down, and my computer keyboard's acting weird, but if you just hold down like control or command and click on the parameter, that will reset it. So I could just kind of click on the particular parameter and reset the options here. So, and just by clicking on that, that will take you to the default state, and you can do that in the mix console as well. So you can just kind of come right over here, and that will take you to the default state. So command or control and click on the plugin parameter. Okay, so you just see, Greg, sometimes the Groove Agent patterns toggle between style and MIDI. So are some presets without style settings? So it depends if you're doing let's say if we have, we just load up. So, there's two different, we could think of Groove Agent as being like two separate drum machines. We could think of it as being like a virtual drummer, and also being a kind of more like an MPC drum machine paradigm. So depending on what you're in, so let's say if I come over and I wanted to load a kit with patterns here. So we'll try just like a house kit. So when I come over here, we're dealing not with like, a real, it's not trying to sound like a real drum part, but it's more kind of sample based, more kind of, okay, when I come here, I see the samples laid out for me. So that's more the MPC when we work with that. So, and I think that once we just come over here and we load up one that's going to be more of the virtual drummer side of things. So let's say if I come here, I'll just load up one. Sorry, my computer is just getting all weird. But once we have that set up, and my computer is just typing in foreign languages now. So if we go to this one, at this point, we have more styles, and these styles can have like natural variations. So when we go to the patterns where you have different levels of complexity with, drum fills and intros and endings. So depending on which particular style that you're, which mode of groove agent. So we could think of it as being maybe like a bit, ambidextrous, if you will, or bipolar, if you will, so it's going to have kind of the, virtual drummer part and kind of the sampling drum machine paradigm, all, all kind of together. So, when we see styles versus MIDI patterns, probably the MIDI patterns is for the sample based here, and the styles would be more for the particular acoustic agent kits. All right, wonderful to see Jay from Connecticut's made it to the live stream. So to see from Jay, so it says, does kind of a follow up to his question on Tuesday's live stream. Does adding Dorco elements as a supplement, not standalone, provide extra functionality to Nuendo and Cubase? So right now there's not much. I think we'll see it as a future theme coming. I know there's, lots of discussions going on between the Dorco and the Cubase development team about, further integration. I know it's kind of in the roadmap. So right now it's still going to be kind of a, separate programs, but, running them, it's not going to really provide extra functionality for Nuendo at this point. But, it does utilize the same audio engine, so the same effects and mixer and the same video engine. So. All right, so we have just a question from David. I've used a transformer icon, then was confused tying transformer as a track insert as there is no filter. Could you please explain how to use the drop down in this one, please? Thanks. All right, so when we take a look at the input transformer, so I'll just add a quick MIDI part here. Okay, so we have, so as we look at our instrument tracks, we have this little doohickey here, this little icon, and this is the input transformer. So we could have this kind of set to local. So let's say I needed, my string library needed responded to MIDI expression, but I don't have a MIDI expression pedal. So what I could do is I'm going to first off enable the MIDI transformer. I want to take my modulation wheel and turn that into CC1 and turn that into expression CC11 because that's what the sample library responds to. So I'm going to say we're going to take our type is going to be equal to controller, and then what we want to do is to be able to say I want to take that controller value 1 and I want to add 10. So I'm going to open up my MIDI inserts to just my MIDI monitor here. And we'll go back to my input transformer. And we can do this globally or locally. So now when I move my modulation wheel with this on, my modulation is spitting out controller 11. I turn this off, and now we're spitting out controller 1. So this is doing this directly on. So that's where we could do, and this would allow us to also filter out, let's say I moved my pitch bend. We could just come over here and, now when I move my modulation wheel, we don't see, we're filtering out controllers. So at this point, if I could only play notes, but if I move my pitch bend wheel or if I filter out controllers, now when I move my modulation wheel, it's filtering that out. So that's what the input transformer is for. And if we go to, let's say, just the MIDI effects, there's a transformer there. And, I think when we do the transformer here, that the intention is, that we don't really filter anything out because we're not filtering it out in real time, but we could take data. Let's say I have modulation data here. So let's say, okay, I wanted to take CC1. And what I want to do is that same thing. I could say, let's transform that existing data. So we say, okay, we're going to take type is equal to controller, and we're going to add 10 to it. So now when we have this enabled, it's going to take the incoming modulation data and convert it to expression. So if it's already recorded. So when we see the filter is for live MIDI input, and we could think of the transformer as the MIDI insert as being for affecting MIDI information that's already in the track and transforming it once it's been entered. So the input transformer is transforming the MIDI data that's being inputted, and the transformer MIDI insert effect is, changing existing data that exists in the part and transforming that. So I hope that makes sense. All right, going through more discussions. Okay, so you just see from Sable, new empty project. Let's see. Adding instrument track in Pro 11, getting error, asking to restart old LEAI elements, 9.5 EXE, crash dump to elements path, J-bridged. 32s were 9.5, rerun J-bridge to 11. So, Sable, if you want to try it without, so it sounds like maybe like, if it's a particular plugin that you're using, let me know if you get the same error message every time that you're loading an instrument, or if it's only with like a JBridge 32-bit plugin that you're trying to load in. So, and it could be that plugin just doesn't respond well to the bridging. But let me know that. Yeah, and as Jazz Dude's mentioning, if you have a replacement for 64-bit, you're probably going to be much better overall for that. See, Jeff Sabelsky just mentioning that's why you miss a Mac, the shrinking window back into the genie bottle. So yeah, it's kind of I find it annoying myself. All right. Okay, so I see from Dan Freeman, I saw your email come through about the SD3 standalone choke mode. So, all right, so I'll do some more reading up. That's good information for me to know. All right, so we have Jack Tin checking in from Thailand. Thanks for joining us. All right, you see Gareth saying, I need a Raspberry Pi, Greg. So, yeah, my son has one, so it's all his. Okay, so just see a question. Let me just find it real quick. Sorry. Hey, Greg, I have an issue I'm facing with MIDI syncing. Is it best to send a video of the issue to have you take a look over? So, yeah, I'd be happy to take a look at it. So if you want to just send me a link or send a video to me at clubcubase at steinberg.de, I'd be happy to look at it. Okay, so we see from Dan Freeman, after adding direct offline processing, how do you actually trigger the processing to be done? What's auto apply do? All right, so let's jump back. Okay, so let's say I have like this drum loop in this file. Make this project active. All right, so let's come over here and I'll just remove the flanger. All right, so let's say I have this drum loop. Okay, how do you actually trigger the processing? So, that's what the, auto apply does. So if you wanted to come to the media bay here, or I'm sorry, to audio, and let's go to your direct offline processing where you hit F7. So if we look at the waveform, if I have auto apply on, and let's say, okay, I want to do a fade out, it'll just then automatically just apply that fade out. If I remove that, so let's say I cut that and I don't have auto apply on and say, okay, I wanted to do a fade in, it won't do that until I click auto apply and then it'll be processed. So if I wanted to cut that and let's say I wanted to do maybe, a number of different functions. So I wanted to normalize it, run it through Magneto twice, and whatever function I want to end all these. So instead of doing that all at one by one as I'm adding it, now I could just add a whole chain and auto apply, and then it's going to just do that one particular process. So some plugins, like if you're doing editing, like if you're doing like stuff with, let's say, even like some people do graphic auto tuning and they'll do all of their editing. And then once they're done with the editing graphically, then they'll auto apply that after the editing has been done. So depending on the type of process, just hitting the auto apply will then trigger that particular function. So if I just want it to, we'll delete all. And so, with auto apply on, we'll see our fade out is automatically done. And if we cut that and without that turned on, I'll say fade in, that we don't see that until you hit the auto apply, then it's going to be done for you. So depending on if it's a short file, it could be so fast that you may not even notice that the process is being applied to the file. So. All right, so we have a question from Jay. Does Hallian 6 have any kind of logical editor for building custom tools beyond synth, like external portable MIDI players? So I think you could get into doing arpeggios and stuff like that. So, as we start to build instruments inside, so let's say, okay, I wanted to come right over here. Let's do Hallian 6. So let's say I just wanted to even do, all right, so let's say I have a harpsichord here. And, if we wanted to just come over here and, edit the flex phraser, we could just say, I wanted to, let's activate the flex phraser here. And now when I play, instead of playing just a chord, we could just say, okay, I wanted to do. But it's not necessarily kind of like a logical editor based, but you could come over here and, if you wanted to do, new chords and have access to kind of all of the different functions that you would see in the arpeggiators that we see in many of the instruments, we could just kind of come right over here. And as we go to, let's say we wanted to come here, we could just say, let's do a new MIDI module. So there will be kind of different, layer alternatives, key switch alternatives, modifiers for CC mapping, velocity curves, tuning scales. So, all these different functions that can, be applied into it. So you could do more creative things, but it's, but so you could just kind of come over here and add some of the different MIDI modules for that, for building the particular instruments. So we see Mike Steinberg create Hallian 6 tutorials for us with learning disabilities, which preclude depthful text-based learning. So, one of the, and I think it's on, I'm pretty sure it's on the Cubase Nation Discord, and he's actually been on the live stream a couple times, but check out, I think it's One Man and His Song. He did like 5 or 6 hours of a walkthrough through Hallian, which I think he did a fabulous job with that. So I would use that. And I think you could probably, that would be a wonderful resource I would wholeheartedly recommend to anyone. So. All right, reading through some more comments. Okay, we see Sable. Sable got her issue resolved with the plugin. So we're seeing Jazz Dudes mentioning he had an Atari back in the day, so it was his 1040 ST. So yeah, I have a Mega 4 ST with a hard disk and a Falcon with a hard disk as well. So yeah, good time. So I don't need another one, so I still have them in a bin in my basement. It's in a little storage. And I had to lend some of my Atari dongles to Junkie XL so he could do a project because he wanted to do it in time period sequencing of Cubase on the Atari. So it's just the Jazz G mentioning was it a 10 megabyte hard disk? So I think the Atari one was a 30 megabyte because I remember having mine partitioned into 3 different partitions and could never imagine getting it full at that point. All right. Okay, reading through more comments. All right. And we also see Jeff Sabelski just mentioning he went through all 26 or so and Howling 6 on Man in a song. So, yeah, so really well done. So, kudos to him for that. So, all right, I think I'm at the end of the questions. We'll see if there's more questions that kind of pop in. If not, we could wrap up a little bit early. I thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. Again, Tuesday's live stream, we'll be doing 2 hours of our normal live stream and then our Zoom meetup because it'll be the last live stream of the month. So if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to send the meeting invite and I'll post it on Tuesday's live stream as well. And we'll be starting at 1 p.m. US Eastern time. So if you're in Central Europe, I think it's 7 p.m. If you're in UK, 6 p.m., 10 a.m. if you're on West Coast in the US, and really early in the morning if you're in Asia, or Australia if you're in Japan. All right, so I'll wait another couple minutes. If not, we'll wrap up just a little bit early and get everyone's weekend started slightly earlier. All right, I'll wait just a couple more seconds and get started, and we'll wrap up. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and end just a couple minutes early. Thanks for all the great questions, and look forward to seeing some new faces on the Zoom meetup. And everyone have a wonderful weekend and stay safe and healthy. Take care.